AI can write like the New York Times. It can paint in the style of real artists. It can even bring long dead figures back into photorealistic video. And all of this raises one enormous question. When a machine creates something that feels human, who actually owns it? This question isn't hypothetical anymore. It's already shaping real court cases, real media companies, and the boundaries of what we think creativity even is. For example, the New York Times is suing OpenAI and Microsoft for what it claims is large-scale copyright infringement. The Times alleges that years of their journalism, millions of carefully crafted articles, were used to train language models that can now produce text similar to their own reporting voice. And then, on a completely different front, we have the issue of likeness. When Sora was released, videos of Martin Luther King Jr. generated by the model went viral. Several of these videos were deemed disrespectful or misleading, prompting the King estate to ask OpenAI to bar the use of his likeness in future models. These cases show that AI isn't just remixing data. It's touching intellectual property, identity, and even the legacies of historical figures. And it forces us to confront a difficult reality. Our laws weren't built for a world where anyone can generate a convincing New York Times article or a lifelike video of a civil rights icon in just seconds with the tools at their disposal. Now, as for creators argue that without their work, without their writing, their art, their reporting, or their photography, these models simply wouldn't be able to exist. After all, an AI model learns from patterns and data, and that data comes from real human labor. From the Times' perspective, for instance, journalists have spent decades building a recognizable voice, a structure, and a way of reporting unique to the New York Times. If an AI system can now generate text that echoes that style, then that style didn't appear out of nowhere. It was learned from those journalists. Artists feel this even more intensely. Many have found that AI models replicating their brushstrokes, color palettes, and composition choices are simply learning and echoing off of their work. Some illustrators even found that entering their names as prompts produces images nearly identical to their style. And when it comes to likeness, the creator's claim becomes even more personal. The King estate, for instance, argues that MLK's image is part of his identity, something they have to protect not just legally, but morally, to preserve the integrity of his legacy and his message. So from this perspective, creators argue that AI outputs built on their work, their style, or their identity are not truly independent. They're downstream derivatives, meaning the originators should have rights, royalties, or at least some form of consent. On the other hand, developers counter with a fundamentally different way of understanding AI output. They argue that models don't store or reproduce exact works. Instead, what they do is convert massive amounts of data into mathematical relationships and, by extension, into patterns that allow them to produce output. From their perspective, the model isn't copying, it's generalizing. It's producing something new based on statistical associations the same way humans do when they learn from reading, watching films, or studying art. Developers also lean heavily on fair use doctrine, which allows for transformative uses of copyrighted material.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Which allows for transformative uses of copyrighted material. They argue that training an AI system is transformative. The output is not a reproduction, but a remixed creation that wasn't explicitly present in the training data. And there's a practical issue. If developers were legally considered the owners of all AI outputs, they would also be responsible for everything harmful, misleading, or defamatory that the model generates. Suddenly, every deepfake, every hallucinated quote, every inappropriate output becomes their legal liability. So from the developer's side, the goal is to preserve AI as a tool, like a calculator or a camera, rather than a publisher or a plagiarist. They argue that the machine generates new material and that the developers shouldn't be chained to every output it produces.
Then there's the user, the person actually interacting with the model. Users argue that prompting is not passive. It's creative work. They decide what to generate, how to phrase the prompt, what style to choose, which outputs to keep, and which to discard. If a photographer doesn't need to build a camera to own the photographs they take, Why should a user need to build an AI model to own the output they direct? Prompting often involves iteration, refinement, artistic decision making. Two people using the same model can produce completely different results. And as AI image, video, and text tools become more advanced, the role of the user becomes more like that of a film director, guiding the model, shaping the aesthetic, and curating the final product. Users argue that creativity is not defined by who built the tool, but it's defined by who uses it. And under that logic, the user, not the developer or the training data creators, should own and control the final work. To understand these competing claims, it helps to think of ownership as a triangle made of three essential parties. First, the input owners, the journalists, artists, and estates whose work or identity shaped the model. Second, the model developers, the companies who built, trained, and maintained the system. Third, the users, the people who give the instructions and create the final output. Different frameworks emphasize different sides of this triangle. A human-first model gives creators the broadest rights over anything derived from their work. A user-first model treats AI like a brush or a camera, giving full ownership to the person prompting. A data trust model tries to mediate. Creators are compensated for contributing to the data, while users still get ownership of the final outputs. Each approach solves one problem and creates another, and no single model has emerged as the global standard. Right now, countries are experimenting, companies are negotiating, and courts are trying to interpret laws written long before AI ever existed. We're in the middle of the most important intellectual property debate of the century. As AI reshapes how text, image, and video are created, the debate over ownership becomes a debate over who shapes culture. Creators, developers, and users all have legitimate claims, and we may end up crafting new laws that blend them all. But one thing is clear. If society doesn't set the rules now, AI systems will define them for all of us.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.